All right, so today I went on the subreddit of no sleep stories. Now, no sleep is a little bit different, has a whole different set of rules when coming to posting a story on there, but I wanted to go on there to find a story that just popped out to me or just really interested me. So I picked out a few. So maybe just I'll be able to read one, but let's jump on into it. We were 4 days into a week-long camping trip in the Chuska Mountains when Danny first heard it. I want to be clear about something before I get into this. Danny is not the kind of person who spooks easily. He grew up in rural New Mexico. He's been hunting since he was 9. He's the guy who stays calm when everyone else is panicking. The guy you would want next to you when things go wrong. When Danny says something scared him, you listen. We were sitting around the fire, me, Danny, his girlfriend Prara, and our friend Marcus, when Danny went quiet in the middle of a sentence. Just stopped talking and stared out past the tree line. "What?" Marcus said. "Do you hear that?" We listened. Wind in the pines, the fire crackling, nothing else. "Hear what?" Prara said. Danny shook his head slowly. "Probably nothing." But he didn't look like it was nothing. He looked like a man doing math in his head and not liking the answer. We're all in our late 20s. The trip was Marcus's idea. He'd been going through a rough divorce and needed to get out of the city, and we all agreed that a week off the grid was exactly what everyone needed. No cell service, no internet, nothing but mountains and trees and the kind of silence that cleans you out. The Chuskas sit on the Navajo Nation. Danny has the ancestry on his mother's side, which is a part of why he suggested the specific location. He knows the land. He respects it in a way that the rest of us, raised on concrete and convenience, don't entirely understand but try to follow his lead. He had one rule when we arrived. Don't be loud after dark. Don't draw attention. We thought he meant bears. The second night was when I heard it. We'd gone to bed around 10. I was in a tent I was sharing with Marcus, almost asleep when it drifted in from somewhere out in the dark. A voice, human, distinct.
"Help me."
I sat up. I unzipped the tent before I'd fully thought it through. Danny was already outside, standing perfectly still, facing the trees. He'd clearly been awake. "Someone's out there," I said. "We have to..." "No." His voice was flat, final. "Danny, someone is..." "Keep your voice down." He turned to look at me, and his expression stopped me cold. I have known Danny for 11 years. I have never seen him look like that. "Get back in the tent. Don't make any noise. Don't use your flashlight. There's someone out there asking for help." "No," he said, very quietly. "There isn't." I stood there for a moment listening. The voice came again, from a slightly different direction than before.
"Help me."
Something was wrong with it. I couldn't name it at first. It was clearly a human voice, the right pitch, the right cadence, 2 recognizable English words. But there was something underneath it that made my spine go cold. Something about the way it landed, like a recording of the words rather than someone actually saying them, like something that had heard the words and was producing the sound without understanding what they meant. I got back in the tent. I didn't sleep. In the morning, Danny explained. Not everything. I don't think he was willing to say everything, but enough. He told us about the Yinalahushti, what outsiders call skinwalkers. He told us they were real, that his grandmother had told him about them since he was small, that there were things in these mountains that were not what they appeared to be. Marcus laughed, not meanly, more nervously. "You're telling me a skinwalker was outside our camp last night?" I'm telling you something was, Danny said. And I'm not telling you that if you had gone out there, it would have been very bad. How do you know it wasn't just someone who needed help? Danny looked at him for a long moment. Because of what he was saying, he let that sit. Then he said, these things, they learn sounds. They mimic what they hear. They're not like animals that learn calls. They specifically learn human sounds. He paused. Think about what sounds a human makes when one of these things find them. The fire popped. Help me, Pyra said quietly. She'd gone pale. Danny nodded. That's what it knows. That's what it's heard over and over for a long time. He looked out at the trees. That's the only reason it says it. Nobody spoke for a while. Marcus, to his credit, did not laugh again. We should have left that morning. I want to be honest about that. We had enough information to make the right call, and we didn't make it. And what happened next is partly on us for that reason. Danny wanted to go. Pyra wanted to go. Marcus and I convinced them to stay. One more day, we said. We'd be careful. We would be quiet. We wouldn't go out after dark. I think we both still hadn't fully accepted what Danny was telling us. Not really. It's one thing to hear something wrong in the dark and feel afraid. It's another thing in the daylight, with the fire going and coffee in your hand, to fully believe that something inhuman spent the night circling your camp. We stayed. The third night, it got closer. I know this because I could hear it moving. Not in an animal way. Animals have a logic to how they move throughout bush. A pattern that makes sense. This was different. It could be still for a long time, and then it would be somewhere else, with no sound of transition, as though it had decided to be in a different place and simply was. Closer now, maybe 40 feet from the tent.
Help me.
30.
Help me.
I was laying completely still with my eyes open in the dark, listening to Marcus breathe beside me, when I became aware of something that made every hair on my body stand up at once. The voice was coming from two different directions, not altering, simultaneously. Two voices, identical, both saying the same words, slightly out of sync with each other.
Help me.
I grabbed Marcus's arm. He was already awake. Neither of us moved. It stayed outside the tent for what felt like an hour. Probably wasn't. Probably 15 minutes at most. But time moves differently when you're laying still in the dark, trying not to breathe too loud, listening to something that learned its only words from dying people, circling your tent in the dark. Then it was gone. Not gradually, just gone. We left before dawn. Danny had us packed and moving while it was still dark, which felt wrong. I wanted light. I wanted to be able to see, but he said movement was safer than staying. He led us with one small flashlight, keeping the beam low, and none of us spoke. The entire 2-mile walk on the trailhead. We were almost to the cars when Pyra grabbed Danny's arm. At the edge of the tree line, maybe 60 feet away, something was standing in the pre-dawn gray. It was tall, too tall. The proportions were almost human, but not quite. The limbs a little long, the head sitting at a slight angle on the neck, like something had learned the shape of a person from a description rather than observation. It was still. It was watching us. Danny kept walking, slow, steady. He didn't look at it directly. He said quietly, without turning his head, "Don't look at it. Don't stop walking. Get in the car." I looked anyway. I wish I hadn't. Because in the moment before I focused my eyes away, it moved. Not towards us, just shifted its weight, a small adjustment. And I heard it, very softly from across the 60 feet of gray morning air.
help me,
And the thing that will stay with me, the thing I can't stop thinking about even now, weeks later, safe in my apartment with the lights on, it sounded hopeful, like something that had been saying those words for a very long time to many people in many situations and had learned that the words worked, had learned that those words made people come closer. We've talked about it since, the four of us. Danny more than anyone. He told me something a few days after we got back, when we were alone, that he hadn't said it in front of the others. He said his grandmother told him that the reason they learn those words, specifically those words, is because of frequency. They learn what they hear most often and what they hear from humans. In the specific situations where they encounter humans is a person at the end of their options. A person realizing in the last moments before the end that they need someone to come. Help me. He said his grandmother told him the worst part isn't that they say it. The worst part is at some point in the very beginning, a very long time ago, one of them heard it for the first time and came closer to see what it meant and learned. I don't go camping anymore. And sometimes late at night when I'm most of the way asleep and the apartment is quiet, I think about that thing standing at the tree line in the gray morning light. I think about how it still was. I think about how long it must have been doing this, how many camps it circled, how many people had heard those two words drift out of the dark and made the mistake of going towards it. I think about how it sounded hopeful, and I turn on the lights and I wait for morning. I want to start by telling you who Jeff is, because none of what comes after makes any sense without it. Jeff and I met the first week of university. Both of us were standing in line to get our student ID cards, and his photo came out terrible. It really looked like a mugshot. He turned around and showed it to me, a complete stranger, and said, "This is genuinely the worst thing that has ever happened to me." I laughed. We talked for the next 40 minutes, and by the time we got to our first class, we had already decided we were eating lunch together. Campus hot dogs. We lived in the same residence that first year, different floors, which meant we were constantly hanging out in each other's rooms. He was cleaner than mine. He had a rug from home, a Doctor Who lamp, and a coffee maker he was inexplicably proud of. My room had a mattress, a desk, and a poster I had put up ironically and then forgotten to take it down 2 years or 1 year. We studied for exams sprawled across his floor with that coffee maker running constantly, his notes color-coded and organized by topic, while mine were written in a single pen and handwriting that got worse as the semester went on. He was better at the numbers. I was better at writing. We figured that out early and used it shamelessly. I am fairly certain neither of us would have passed first year accounting without the other. We went to every party that would have us and some that would not. Jeff always knew someone who knew someone. I was always the one driving home at 2 a.m. while he talked too loudly in the passenger seat about things that felt profound and were not. He also had this thing where his voice changes a little depending on who he is talking to. We played beer pong at a Halloween party in October against 2 guys from engineering who took it very seriously, and we beat them anyway, mostly because Jeff had a gift for cheerful trash talk and disarming people before they realized what was happening. Second year, we got an apartment together off campus, 2 bedrooms above a Vietnamese restaurant, 1 pot, 2 plates, and a constant smell of pho that we eventually stopped noticing. The sriracha was always flowing as well. I swear I still can't pronounce it properly, and Jeff never lets me forget it. Jeff's high school girlfriend, Claire, broke up with him in November of that year, and I came out of my room at midnight to find him sitting in the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets. I did not say anything wise or useful. I just made bad coffee in his coffee maker and sat on that floor with him until almost 4 a.m. He told me years later that was exactly what he had needed. He was quieter for a few months after that. Then in the 3rd year, he met Hannah at a party, a friend of someone neither of us actually knew. And 20 minutes after they started talking, he found me across the room and grabbed my arm and said, "I need you to come meet this person right now." I went. She was sharp and warm and laughed easily. And I understood immediately why he looked the way he looked. That was 6 years ago. Since then, it has been weekly calls, monthly dinners, double dates, game nights that start at 7 and would end at 2 in the morning with everyone too tired to drive home. Jeff and Hannah got married 3 years ago. I met Amaya the year after graduation, and we got married 18 months later. The 4 of us fit together in the easy way that good friendships do, where no one has to perform and the silence is comfortable. 2 weeks ago, the 4 of us got back from a long weekend in Montreal. Sorry, Quebec City. We ate too much and walked until our feet hurt. And on the second night, Jeff and I found a dive bar while Amaya and Hannah went back to the hotel, and we sat there until last call, talking about nothing in particular. The way you only can with someone you have known long enough that you stop keeping score. On the flight home, he fell asleep in the seat next to mine, and I sat there reading, and somewhere over the highway it occurred to me that I could not picture my adult life without him. I need you to hold on to that for me, because I am about to describe things that are going to make Jeff sound like a monster. And the part I keep getting stuck on, even now, is that I am not sure that word covers it. Monsters are simple. You see them and you run. That is what made it so hard to see. The game night was a Tuesday in October, or maybe it was a Wednesday. Nothing special about it. Our place, the 4 of us, a bottle of wine Jeff brought that was too expensive for a Tuesday, in which he did not mention the price of, which was always such a Jeff thing to do. Amaya made the dip she always makes, the one Hannah asks for the recipe for every time and never writes down. We sat around the coffee table and talked and laughed, and it was exactly like every other game night for 6 years. Then Jeff told the road trip story. Junior year, the 2 of us driving 8 hours to see a band that had broken up before we arrived. We have told that story 100 times between us. It has always been a we were both idiots story, equal parts, both of us, the punchline. Tonight was different. Not obviously, just slightly off in the framing. The way a photo looks wrong when someone has hung it a centimeter crooked. In every version of that story I have ever heard Jeff tell, we were idiots together. Tonight I was the idiot and Jeff was there to witness it. The punchline landed on me alone. Hannah laughed. Amaya glanced at me with a small look I recognized. Somewhere between confusion and questioning, Jeff moved on immediately as nothing had shifted at all. I told myself I was being sensitive and poured more wine and rejoined the conversation. By 11, I had almost let it go. Then I look up, and Jeff was watching me. Not the game, not Hannah, not Amaya, just me. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, long enough to be strange, short enough that I could have not described what I saw in his expression. Then he looked away and said something funny, and everyone laughed and the moment was gone. I went upstairs to use the bathroom. We had one downstairs, but I went upstairs without thinking about it, the way you do in your own home. I opened the bathroom door as I started washing my hands, and Jeff was standing right there in the hallway, close enough that I almost walked into him. He looked at me for half a second with an expression I did not have a name for. Then his face rearranged itself, and he was just Jeff again, easy and relaxed. "There you are," he said, casual, light, like he had been looking for me for some ordinary reason he did not feel the need to state. He headed back downstairs. I stood in the hallway alone for a moment, with the bathroom door open behind me and the water still running in the sink. The rest of the night was completely normal. Jeff was warm and funny and entirely himself. We all hugged at the door at midnight, and he squeezed my shoulder and told me he loved me the way he always did at the end of the night. I almost convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. Almost. Amaya fell asleep quickly. I laid next to her, staring at the ceiling, and could not have told you exactly what was bothering me. Nothing had happened. Not really. A story told slightly wrong. A look that went a beat too long. A friend in the hallway. My phone lit up at 3 a.m. Jeff's name. I answered quietly so I wouldn't wake up Amaya. Silence. Not a bad connection. The specific silence of someone on the other end who was choosing not to speak. "Jeff," I said. "Hello? I know it's you. Did you have too much to drink?" Then his voice came, flat and slow, the way words sound when someone is reading them off a page. "There you are." A pause, maybe 3 seconds. Then the tone shifted completely, warm and relaxed and slightly drunk. He said that he had just called to say he had a great time tonight. He laughed a little. He sounded completely like himself, exactly like the Jeff who had squeezed my shoulder 2 hours earlier. I laughed and said goodnight and hung up. Amaya stirred. "Who was that?" "Jeff," I said. "Drunk dial. Go back to sleep." She did. I did not. I lay there going back through the evening, the story, the stare, the hallway. There you are. The phone call. There you are. I told myself I was exhausted and reading into things and that Jeff had simply drunk dialed me and said something strange. My phone buzzed. A text from Jeff. No message, just a photo. I opened it and looked at it for a long time before I understood what I was seeing. My house, taken from outside, from the street at night. The bedroom window was visible in the upper right corner, and inside it's a pale rectangular glow. I looked at the photo, then I looked up at the window. Then I looked at the photo again. The glow in the window was my phone screen. The photo had been taken while I was looking at it. I woke up in the morning and checked immediately. The photo was gone, no text from Jeff at all, just a call log showing his name at 3:04 a.m. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while. It was possible I had dreamed the photo. I had barely slept. The mind does things in that half state between exhaustion and consciousness, but I knew I had not dreamt it. I got dressed and drove to work, and on the way I thought I saw Jeff's truck going the opposite direction on my street. I let it go. He lives across the city, and there are a lot of gray trucks. Work was ordinary until mid-morning when I knocked a full coffee across my shirt in the break room. I was alone when it happened. Nobody saw. I went to my office and changed into the backup shirt I kept at my desk drawer. Something I have done maybe twice in 3 years, and got on with my day. At lunch, Jeff texted me, easy and warm, asking how the morning went, saying Hannah had a great time last night. I read it 3 times, looking for something off, and found nothing. I texted back and felt myself relax a little. My tire was flat when I left the building at 5. I crouched down and looked at it. There was something embedded near the valve stem, thin and pointed. I could not tell exactly what it was. I called a tow and stood in the parking garage waiting, and called Amaya. Jeff answered her phone. He explained cheerfully that he had stopped by to drop off the scarf Hannah left at our place the night before, and Amaya had just stepped out to the car and he had grabbed her phone when it rang. Did I want him to have her call me back? I said no. It was fine, just a flat tire. He said he could come get me. I said yes because I did not yet understand why I should say no. We went for beers at a place near my office. Jeff was completely himself, asking about work, telling me about a difficult client, laughing at things the way he always laughed. By the second drink, I was starting to feel like an idiot for the week I had been having inside my own head. Then he was showing me things on his phone. Landscaping projects, a vintage watch he was thinking about buying, scrolling casually, and without looking up he said, "At least you had the backup shirt, right?" I went still. I asked him how he knew about the shirt. He glanced up, no hesitation, no flickering of anything. Amaya mentioned it when she called me, before you called. He shrugged and kept scrolling. It was plausible, perfectly plausible. He had delivered it so immediately and so smoothly that I sat with it for a full 10 seconds. Running the math, Amaya had called him. He had answered before I did. She could have mentioned the shirt in that window. He kept scrolling and then he was showing me something else. And I was almost ready to let it go when I caught it. Half a second as his thumb moved past it, a photo that looked like a parking garage. My parking garage. My car. The angle from ground level near the entrance. He swapped back without flinching and kept talking. I stood up. I told him I had seen it. He looked up at me with an expression of complete puzzlement. He turned the phone around and scrolled back. Nothing there. Just the watch, photos, and work stuff. I told him I knew what I saw. The puzzlement shifted into something that looked like concern, and then very carefully into something that looked like hurt. He said he didn't know what was going on with me lately. He said he was worried about me. I told him I did not want to ride home. He followed me outside. I stood in the cold ordering an Uber and Jeff stayed close, too close, working through every register of the concerned friend. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe work was getting to me. Maybe Amaya and I were having problems and I was projecting onto him. The car pulled up and I got in. Just as the door closed, Jeff leaned down slightly and through the glass with the door already shut, so I could not respond. He said something about Amaya, something specific, her tattoo, a detail about her body that exists under her clothing. Something no one outside our marriage should know. The car pulled away. I watched him through the rear window. He stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, watching the car go. I did not say a word the entire ride home. Amaya was warm when I got back. Normal. She had made dinner and asked about my day, and I sat across from her and told her everything. The photo at 3 a.m, the shirt, the parking garage, what Jeff had said, as the door closed. Amaya is not a liar. It is one of the things I have always known about her. She does not have the face for it. So when she denied it, I believed her. And that made everything worse because if it was not an affair, then I was left with something I did not have a word for. Jeff knowing things he should not know. Jeff appearing in places he should not be. I needed air. I took Amaya's car and drove without a destination and ended up eating alone in a fast food parking lot at 9 at night, which is something you do when something has come loose inside you. There was a figure standing near the far entrance to the lot, just standing there, not moving. The distance and the bad lighting made it impossible to be certain, but something about the stillness of it made my hair go up on my arms. I did not get out. I turned the key and the headlights came on. It lit up the spot where it had been. Nothing there. I drove home checking every mirror, locked every door, every window, every deadbolt, got into bed without waking Amaya and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. 3 words. Are you awake? I put the phone facing down and did not sleep until it was light. Breakfast the next morning was the kind of quiet that happens after a fight that has not technically started yet. Amaya and I moved around each other carefully. She left for work and I called in sick and sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee. I arranged for the tire to get looked at and then called Hannah, keeping it friendly, just checking in, listening for anything underneath the surface of her voice. She was warm and easy. She asked about Amaya, mentioned they should do another game night soon, and Jeff had told her I seemed a bit stressed lately and she hoped everything was okay. I said everything was fine. At the tire shop, the mechanic came out holding something between his fingers. A garden spade tip, narrow and sharp, the kind that breaks off from a small hand tool. Odd, he said, but these things happen. I opened my phone and saw that Jeff had posted to his Instagram story 20 minutes ago. Jeff in his backyard, smiling at something off camera, a garden spade in his hand. I sat there looking at it until the mechanic came back with my keys. Then I got into Amaya's car. The smell hit me before I even closed the door. Dior Chanvé, Jeff's cologne. I know that smell the way you know a smell that has been in your life for years. It was not a trace of it. It was recent and strong, the way a smell is when the person wearing it has not been there long. I sat in that parking lot with the garden spade and the cologne occupying the same morning and understood that I was done trying to talk myself out of it. I drove to Jeff and Hannah's. My body knew the route without thinking. Something was off about the house when I pulled up. Nothing dramatic. The curtains were drawn in the middle of the day. There was a chair visible through the front window that I did not remember being there before. A feeling like a place that had been arranged in a hurry. Hannah answered the door, and for just a moment, before her expression settled, I saw something in her face that I can only describe as alarm. Then it smoothed over, and she was warm and stepping back to let me in, asking if I wanted tea. I said yes. The living room felt slightly off, the same way the outside had, like a room assembled by someone working from memory rather than habit. I was looking around, trying to identify the specific thing that was off, when I noticed a framed photo on the wall near the bookcase that had not been there before. I walked towards it. Hannah came in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs and looked at me looking at the photo. "There you are," she said. The photo showed a group of people standing in a field at night, maybe 15 of them arranged in a loose circle. I could not see what was at the center from where I stood, but the light it cast suggested a fire. The people in the photo were not looking at the camera. They were all looking inward at whatever was at the center. Jeff was on the left side of the frame. Hannah was beside him. I asked about it. She set down the mugs and came to stand next to me and gave me a perfectly composed explanation. A bonfire a few summers back. Friends from Jeff's work. Nothing special. Her voice did not waver once. I sat down and drank the tea because I did not know what else to do. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. Hannah asked twice how I was sleeping. She asked if I had been eating well, if work was stressful, if Amaya and I were doing okay. The questions were warm in tone, but there were too many of them, and they were all aimed at the same place. Somewhere in the second cup, I started feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, thick, like the air in the room had developed weight. My thoughts were arriving slightly delayed. I set the cup down and made an excuse and stood up. Hannah smiled and stayed in her chair. She did not move to show me out. "Jeff will be so sorry he missed you," she said. I made it to my car and sat there. The world had a quality I did not like. I knew I should not have drove, but I could not stay. My phone buzzed. A text from Jeff. "Hope Hannah took good care of you." I called Amaya, told her I was at Jeff and Hannah's, that I thought something was wrong with the tea. She asked why I had gone up there. I started to explain. Then I heard it, faint but clear through the phone, a train. Distant and rhythmic. There is no train anywhere near Amaya's office. I have been there more times than I can count. Something knocked on my windshield, and I came back to the world very fast. Jeff was standing outside my car door, somehow already there. His expression was open and concerned. "Hey, you okay in there?" I started the car. He stepped back, hands raised. "Whoa, you really shouldn't be driving right now, man." I pulled out of the driveway. In my mirror, Jeff stood in the driveway watching me leave. He did not reach for his phone. He did not move at all. He just watched. His car appeared behind me 3 blocks later. I drove to the police station and pulled into the lot and watched Jeff's car slowly pass. Then it kept going and was gone. Inside, I sat across from an officer and tried to explain 10 days of accumulation in a way that did not sound like nothing. The shirt, the photo at 3 in the morning, the tire, the cologne, the photo on the wall, the tea, the train in the background of the phone call. The officer listened with the particular patience of someone who has already decided what they were hearing. Then the door opened and Jeff walked in. He looked worried. He put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed it and told the officer that his friend had been under a lot of pressure lately, hadn't been sleeping, probably just needed a rest. He laughed softly, the laugh of a man who was not embarrassed on my behalf, just genuinely concerned. I watched the room shift as he spoke, watched the skepticism I had been fighting transfer onto me. I watched the room shift as he spoke, watched the skepticism I had been fighting transfer itself onto me, cleanly and completely, without anyone noticing it happened. The officers, either out of empathy or charm, dismissed me and my claims. Jeff looked at me once during this, briefly, while the officers was writing something down. He smiled, just barely, just enough for me to see it and nobody else. Then he winked at me. I walked out with Jeff because there was nothing else to do. He had made that true without anyone in that room seeing him do it. He drove, I sat in the passenger seat and watched streets scroll past that I did not recognize and focused on staying awake. The tea was still working on me, and my thoughts kept sliding sideways. I focused on landmarks, a red brick building, a railroad bridge, a grocery store with a yellow sign. Jeff said nothing. His hands were easy on the wheel. He looked like a man going somewhere he had always planned to go. The red brick building again. We had passed it already. We were not going anywhere. We were driving in a loop. I tried to say something, and what came out were not the right words. Jeff glanced at me once. He was smiling at the road ahead. My eyes closed, and I could not get them back open. "I'm going to tell you what I woke up to, and I need you to stay with me." I woke up slowly. The fog was still thick at the edges of everything, and for just a second, one single merciful second before memory came back, I thought I was home. I thought I had fallen asleep on our couch and Amaya was somewhere in the next room and everything was fine. Then I heard the train. I completely still and lay there listening. The house was quiet except for that distant rhythmic sound coming through the walls. I knew that sound. I had heard it in the background of Amaya's phone call and I had not been able to place it then. And now I knew exactly what it meant and where I was. Nowhere I had chosen to be. I sat up slowly. There was a blanket over me that someone had placed there while I was unconscious, and I tried not to think about that. The room looked like a living room. Warm lamps, comfortable furniture, the kind of space that takes years to accumulate. Normal in every way except for the photos on the wall. 4 of them, different locations, different seasons, Different groups of people, but the same composition in every single one. A circle of people standing around, something at the center, something burning, everyone facing inward, nobody looking at the camera. I stood up on shaky legs and walked towards the mantle. I did not know exactly what I expected to find there, not what I found. A napkin folded open with a dark stain across it, dried and brownish, the color blood goes when it has been sitting there for a while. Next to it, 4 teeth arranged in a row, small and flat, the kind that come from the front of a mouth. They looked human. I'm not a doctor and I cannot tell you with certainty that they were human, but I can tell you that they looked it, and that my body understood something about them before my brain caught up. There were other things on that mantle that I am not going to describe in full because I do not have the language for them, and because some part of me is still trying to protect you from the specific shape of what I saw. Objects that suggested ritual. Objects that suggested this room had been used for something with a logic I could not follow, a logic that had been practiced and repeated and refined over a long time. I stood there looking at all of it and understood for the first time that fire photos were not decoration. They were a record. Then I heard a thud from somewhere above me, then footsteps. Slow and unhurried on the stairs, the footsteps of someone who has nowhere to be and no reason to rush. I turned around and Jeff came down into the room and stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at me. He did not say anything. He just smiled. Not the careful version, not the controlled warmth I had been watching for 6 years. The smile he used at parties and game nights and police stations. This was wider than that and more patient. The smile of something that had been kept in a smaller space than it needed and has finally been allowed to take up its actual size. I asked him where we were. He said nothing. I asked him what this was. I asked him what was on the mantle. I asked him what was in the photos. My voice was getting louder and I could hear it happening, and I could not stop it. I asked him how long. How long had he been planning this? How long has he known? What had I done? What did he want from me? Jeff stood at the bottom of the stairs with his hands loose at his sides and watched me the way you watch something you have been waiting for a long time to see. Then he spoke. His voice was calm and almost gentle. He said that I did not need to be afraid, and said that what was happening was not something being done to me, but something being done for me. He said that the people in the photos had all felt what I was feeling right now, and that every single one of them had come to understand, in time, that they had been chosen for something larger than themselves. He used a word I did not recognize, a name, something that sounded almost like a title, and the way he said it made it clear that whatever or whoever it referred to was the axis around which everything else turned. The fires, the photos, the teeth on the mantle, all of it in service of something I was only now being introduced to. He said it like it was offering me something. I backed away from him until I felt the wall behind me. Then I heard Amaya's voice. Baby. It came across the room from a door that was open just a crack. And even in that single word, something was wrong with the sound of her. Not wrong the way a bad phone connection is wrong. Wrong the way a record is wrong. Like something producing the sound of her voice rather than her voice itself. I looked at the gap in the door. She was looking back at me through it. Just her face visible in the narrow space, and even from across the room, I could see that she looked different. Her face was her face, but the proportions were slightly off in a way I could not pin down. The way a familiar room looks wrong in a dream. Her eyes were too wide, and too still, and the light in them was not quite the right kind of light. She giggled. It was her giggle, the one I had heard 1,000 times, but arriving now from somewhere slightly outside where it should have been, like an echo of itself. Then she said, "There you are." She pushed the door open a little wider and looked at me with that too wide expression and beckoned slowly with one hand, gesturing down towards whatever was below her, towards the basement. Then she leaned close to the gap and said something else, something quiet, something that had the rhythm of words without quite resolving into them from where I was standing. A phrase or a sentence or something older than either of those things, said under her breath like a response in a call and response she had been practicing for a long time. I did not move towards her. I did not think I was breathing. Hannah came down the stairs and knew immediately from the way she moved that whatever Jeff had said about being chosen, whatever the words was that he had used like a title, Hannah was not a recent convert to it. She moved like someone who had been inside this for a long time. Her clothes had blood on them, her hands and her forearms, and she did not seem to notice or care, the way you do not notice a smell you have been living inside for a very long time. She saw me and smiled. I ran at her. I hit her hard enough that she went down and I felt the impact through my whole body, and she hit the floor, and I was already moving past her towards the stairs when I heard her start to laugh. Not a pained sound, not shocked or frightened, just laughing. Fully and completely, her body moving with it, lying on her back on the floor, laughing at the ceiling, the way you laugh at something that has been building up for a long time, that has finally arrived. I looked back at her for half a second and her eyes were open and she was looking at nothing, just laughing into the air above her, and there was something running from the corner of her mouth that I did not look at long enough to identify. I found the nearest door and there was no knob on my side, just a smooth plate where the knob should have been. I found another. Same thing. I found the window at the end of the room and hit it with both fists, and the glass shuddered, but it held. I hit it again. I could feel something giving in my hands, either the glass or me, and I did not care which. A crack appeared, thin and branching, spreading out from the point of impact like a spider web, and I hit it again, and it spread further, and I hit it again, and it held. It just held. No matter what I did, it would not break through. Hannah stopped laughing. I turned around. She was on all fours on the floor, her head hanging down between her shoulders, her hair falling forward. She was looking at me from that position, chin almost touching the carpet, and she was grinning with her mouth open, and there was drool on her lips and on the floor beneath her face, and she was not making any sound at all, now, which was much worse than just laughing. Jeff walked into the room from the hallway with his hands in his pockets. He stopped near the center and looked around at all of it without any urgency, the way you look around a room you have stood in many times before. Hannah on all fours on the carpet, Amaya in the doorway with her head at the wrong angle, me with bleeding hands pressed against a cracked window. He looked at each of us in turn. And then he looked at me and smiled and said quietly, almost warmly, "She can't wait to see you." I looked at him, and in that moment, standing there in the lamplight with the hands in his pockets, looking so much like the person I had eaten lunch with and driven home from past parties and sat next to on a flight home from Montreal 2 weeks ago, I noticed something I had not noticed before. He was not blinking. Not in the way a person forgets to blink when they are concentrating, In the way something does not blink because it has learned that blinking is a part of the performance and has simply stopped performing. His eyes were perfectly still and perfectly open, and they had not moved since he walked into the room. I looked at him and understood that whatever Hannah and Amaya were in the visible stage of, Jeff had passed through a long time ago. He had just been better at wearing what came after. He put his hands back in his pocket and said something else. I have been sitting here typing this for almost 2 hours. I want to be straight with you before I finish because I think you have earned that much by getting to the end. I am not scared anymore. I noticed that about 40 minutes into writing this, and I am telling you because I think it is the most important thing in this whole story. This was not a cry for help. There is no version of this where you were going to save me. That was never what this was for. What this was for was keeping you still. While you were reading this, someone was given your address. I cannot tell you exactly when during the story it happened. Early, possibly. Before you were a third of the way through. While you were reading, someone left to come to where you are. They are not in a hurry. They never are. That is one of the first things you learn. I want you to think about the last 2 hours. Think about whether you heard anything and explained it away. A sound from another room you told yourself was the house settling. Something outside you decided not to get up and check. A door you cannot remember whether you locked before you sat down. Think about whether the room feels the same as it did when you started reading. You shifted in your seat about 20 minutes ago. You reached for your phone once and put it back down without unlocking it. You have been alone this whole time, or you thought you were, which is not quite the same thing. I remember being where you were. I remember finishing something like this and sitting in the quiet afterwards with that feeling that the air in the room had changed while I was busy looking at a screen. I remember telling myself I was being ridiculous. That feeling was not ridiculous. I am sorry for what comes next. I mean that in whatever way I am still capable of meaning anything. There is something left in me that remembers sitting on the kitchen floor at 4 a.m. with my best friend who needed me to stay. And that part knows what it is taking from you. That part is sorry. But she has been waiting a long time, and this is how it works. This is how it has always worked. But put your phone down, look up from your screen, and there you are. Alright, so that was 2 stories from the No Sleep Reddit. Now, this author who wrote both of these stories done a fantastic job. The second story that I read was phenomenal. I did not know what I was getting into when I read these stories, but the ending of the second one is very fascinating. It leaves you with a lot of questions about this situation and setting that the author has put us in. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this type of video. Hopefully I can find more No Sleep Reddit stories if you like hearing that, and I can hopefully post more about that. But until next time, thank you for watching and subscribe, because a lot of my people who watch my videos are not subscribed. I think it's like 82%. So if you enjoy content like this, please consider subscribing and liking and commenting. It does help the channel, and it pushes me to put more content out that everyone enjoys and likes, as well as me enjoying it. And quick little announcement, I also have a Discord server linked to this channel. So if you want to go check it out, it's very small at the moment, but if you want somewhere where you can talk about unexplained things or about your pets or about your musical interests, just click that link down below and you can join the Discord server. So until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.